So around this time of year, I always try to make a patriotic video because I love my country, the United States. And one of the biggest reasons I love my country is it's just such a beautiful country. I think the United States is the most beautiful country in the world. I mean, I don't know where to start. It's such a beautiful country. I mean, I think one testament to it is I'm always shooting in the woods. And I know this is not the prettiest shot. I'm like, America is the most beautiful country in the world. And then I show this shot, which is, it's all right. It's pretty. It's on a hill. It's not exactly a great time of the day for the sunlight. It's pretty dark, except for on this tree here. But still, I do think the United States is just such a beautiful country. And one reason I love the United States is just that there's so much nature here. I love nature. I mean, I think man was created to live in nature. I mean, man was created for the Garden of Eden, to live in the Garden of Eden. And I still legitimately believe we are happy in nature, particularly in the forest and things of that nature. Things like Eden around forests and rivers and stuff. And it really just all the nature because God intended man to live on the earth with all the nature of the earth. And the United States is such a beautiful country. Seriously, if you've never been to the United States, come just for the nature. Forget about the strip malls and the McDonald's and the Walmarts and all that stuff. I mean, none of that stuff. I mean, unfortunately, we've exported that to the whole world. Forget about all that nonsense and just come to the nature. This is the most beautiful country in the world. We have so much beauty here. It is unreal. And it is really sad that we just don't treat the nature here all that well. I mean, we've made it into a country of freeways and, so much trash. We throw a bunch of trash on the side of the road. And it's just, we definitely have polluted the country. Though thankfully it is honestly getting better. Like it's moving in a better direction. For instance, America's gotten more forested as time goes on. Since the 70s, America's being more forested. For instance, the land you're looking at is a living testament to it. Where 50, 60 years ago, this was a cattle land. And if you were to, go back here, like 50, 60 years ago, you'd be seeing cows and stuff. In fact, when I walk through here, I can still see the remnants of barbed wire that's actually grown into the trees and stuff. And, still some remnants, some cedar fence posts. Cedar is the best wood because cedar is it's like if hardwood and an evergreen had a baby. Cedar's an excellent wood, and it lasts a very long time. So I find some of the cedar fence posts out here, they're still around, and they still got some barbed wire and stuff in them. And it's just, I love the United States. I love the nature here. I don't even know where to start. It's just, there's so much beauty. I mean, you go up to New England. In New England, they got these big, great forests. And even in New England, which is probably one of the more urbanized areas of the country, even up there, they still got a bunch of nature. The forests in New England's forests have really come back because you go out to a lot of those areas like 200 years ago, that all would have been farmland, but a lot of that area has been depopulated now, and the forest has made its return. So even up in New England, they got a forest, and then you go down to New York, and New York's interesting because New York's famous for the great big city, and definitely New York's an interesting sight to see. Neat architecture, but I mean, New York and upstate New York's very beautiful. One thing I always get real fascinated by New York is that, New York's got the Atlantic Ocean, but then New York's also got the Great Lakes at the same time, all in one state, which I find really neat. And then, you go down, I know some people really like those New England winters. I don't, because, I don't care much for the cold, but I'm sure there's some Yankees listening that really enjoy them New England winters and like them, that time in the New England forest, picking apples or so I always heard that they pick apples or something and they drink the cider in the winter or whatever they do. I'm not a Yankee. And, it's just, that's another thing about the United States is all the diversity and the climate around here. Where, you go up north, it's quite cold. It used to be a lot colder. It was the mini ice age when the Puritans first come up there. And maybe way southwards, it gets warmer. But, you're just trading you're either going to pick between a cold winter or a hot summer or the air pollution of LA. Because that's why everybody went to LA because all the weather was nice and then it was real bad air pollution. But, it is a very beautiful country. You go up into New England, it's real pretty. New York, famously very pretty state. Pennsylvania is a pretty state. A lot of neat history in Pennsylvania too. If I'd lived in colonial America, I would have lived in Pennsylvania because all the Quakers and a lot of the religious freedom in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia used to have a pretty strong Universalist scene back in the day, and there's a lot of pretty nature. And you go southwards. I love Virginia. Virginia is my favorite, my second favorite state. North Carolina is my favorite, but it is my second favorite state. And Virginia is the oldest state in the country. Established 1607, Jamestown colony, not Plymouth colony. I always get so annoyed by this. The country does not start with Plymouth colony in 1620. The foundations of the United States are in Jamestown colony in 1607. All right. But definitely the holidays. You can always tell our history books were written by Yankees, and you can always tell America was historically controlled by the Yankees after the Civil War, because at Thanksgiving they're always trying to tell you, oh, the Puritans founded America, but there was the Puritans only founded New England, and then of course around Christmas they always try to portray it as a white Christmas. We don't get white Christmases down here. And always portray it like it's you get 6 foot of snow at Christmas. That's how a lot of Yankees have their hands in media, because they're always talking about the Pilgrims at Thanksgiving, and they're always showing a white Christmas at Christmas. Anyways, enough of my talking about the Yankees. It's just a lot of beautiful, beautiful land in Virginia. Virginia, a lot of rich history, beautiful state. Virginia mountains, absolutely beautiful. The western, that song everybody likes to sing, was it West Virginia? That's not about West Virginia, the state. The West Virginia is a very beautiful state. It's about Western, it was Country Road, that's right. It's about Western Virginia. Western Virginia is a very, very beautiful place out there in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia. Very, very, very beautiful. Virginia is a very pretty state. I've always been a big fan of Virginia. Very, very beautiful state. And a lot of rich history in Virginia. Very first state in the country. A large part of America used to be Virginia. And then you have my home state of North Carolina. And definitely you can always see the diversity in the United States and its land by the diversity of North Carolina. Because on the very eastern part of the state, we have a very unique phenomena, really nothing like in the rest of the world, the Outer Banks. And then you got the Standard Coast. And then, a lot of rich history out there. Like, you ever been to the Outer Banks? It's famous for its many, many lighthouses. Eastern part of the state's real neat. The very first city out there, our original capital of our state was called Bath. It's named after a city in England, I believe. And, a lot of rich history in the eastern part of the state, because it's very old. You go out to the eastern part of the state, you find a bunch of old plantation houses and stuff, because it's an old part of the state. It's very old. You go out to the eastern part of the state, that was so flat. It's very flat and covered in pine trees, so I personally don't care much for it, because I live in the foothills, and that's the Piedmont. It's the central part of the state. And everything around here is a foothill. I was talking with a fellow from Florida just the other day, and he was like, oh, North Carolina's nothing but hills. And I just said, that's just the Piedmont. You got to the eastern part of the state, it's flat. But around here, it's very hilly. And I love the hills of the Piedmont. It's a very beautiful place. Especially you go up to the rural Piedmont. Sometimes I feel like I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. I get up on a big hill, and I can see out over the other hills, the big hills and the forest on them. And they're very pretty. The foothills of North Carolina are definitely our sight to see. It's a very beautiful sight. And then, of course, in the western part of the state, we got the Appalachian Mountains. And they pronounce Appalachian, not Appalachian. And that's always, I get annoyed. If you come down to the south and you say Appalachian, or Appalachia, as I know some people might say, or there's multiple different ways to pronounce it, but you don't say Appalachian, people are going to judge you because you're not saying it right. And that's how Southerners do. But I mean, it's a very pretty mountain. It's a very, very pretty mountains. I think the most beautiful part of the country of all. If you've ever been to the beautiful mountain creeks up there, it's unreal how pretty they are. Very beautiful creeks and rivers and Appalachian Mountains, and the hills are beautiful. And to my people, the Scots-Irish, we have a very sacred connection to those mountains, because our ancestors over in Scotland and Ireland and so on, they lived on the very same mountains because of plate tectonics. They lived on the exact same mountains over there because those were the same mountains. And then they come over here and live on the same mountains. So we have a very ancient connection to those mountains, and I love them quite dearly. And of course, my ancestors have lived on them for a very, very long time, and our people hail from those mountains. That's where we originally colonized. When we come into this country, we took over the Appalachian Mountains. And I never will forget, I was out there on a trip, and I remember because I was a part of something similar to the Boy Scouts, and one of the commanders said, 200 years ago, this was the West, and he was right. It was not that long ago, really, that Daniel Boone was making his way across the mountains, and it was not that long ago at all. And it's just very interesting. It's just a rich ancientness to the land, and of course, you go up to the very, very western part of the state, you get the Cherokee Indian Reservation. That's one of the few Indian reservations left in the east because Andrew Jackson had them all moved out west. But it's just interesting to see all the land. It's really neat, especially to go to the Cherokee because everything's all the signs and the road signs they're in the Cherokee language. So it's it's still in the United States. It's still in North Carolina, but a lot of the stuff's inside a foreign language, which is very interesting to see because they don't use our alphabet either. They use the Cherokee script, and definitely an interesting sight to see. But you move westwards. You get down to, of course, you go up. You get to the Great Lakes, and I find the Great Lakes fascinating. I just find it amazing that we have these giant freshwater bodies in the middle of our country. I just find that fascinating. Like there really is nothing else quite like them in the world. I mean, they're just huge, and they're really neat to me. And we have five of them. They're just so huge, and they're just it's so amazing. I mean, this shows you how awesome and how beautiful the United States is. That we have these awesome, giant freshwater bodies of water in the middle of the United States, and then of course also you got the famous Mississippi River, and of course you can't tame the Mississippi. It does its own thing, and many have tried, but the Mississippi always finds a way to stop. To always get in the way of our plans to try to control the Mississippi. And you go down further south, you get to the bayous, and you got Louisiana. And I never cared much for New Orleans when I went. It was pretty run down. A lot of degeneracy down there in the Big Easy. Of course, you also got Florida. Florida's a very fascinating state because it's this weird mismatch. It's like because it's mostly actually Yankees down there. If you talk to the people, even the people that are actually born in Florida, their parents are like from Massachusetts or Illinois or something. So it's actually these days it's mostly, especially the southern parts of the state, are mostly colonized by Yankees these days. But it's real interesting down there, the land, because it's got the bayous and famously you got the orange trees and got a bunch of alligators down there. Neat sight. A lot of people like it down there because all the tourism. Very humid down there in Florida, very hot. But people really like it down there. And then of course you go down to Louisiana. Got the deep South states, and you move outwards to Texas. Texas got wide open land. That's why everybody likes Texas because Texas is so big. My grandpa tells me that when Alaska becomes a state, the Texans were mad because they were no longer the longest state. And he says, the Texans used to say that if you scraped in all the ice and snow off Alaska, it wouldn't be no bigger than Rhode Island. Because, the Texans were upset about no longer being the largest state in the country. But, Texas is big and hot, very hot state. Summertime, even hotter than it is down here. You got Oklahoma. It just amazes me that, people live in Oklahoma and Kansas because of all the tornadoes. I mean, in the South, we got plenty of tornadoes, but you got even more tornadoes up there. And it's just like, I just couldn't do it, man. I couldn't. Just the tornadoes, man. They freak me out. I mean, we get them every spring around here. At one time, I was real young. One tornado come by not too far from where I live, and it just it tore its way through the trees. And of course, we actually have more tornadoes in the United States than any other country in the world. We lead the way in tornadoes in the United States. That's another thing about the United States. Don't get me started about the weather here. The weather really puts you in your place. I already talked about the Mississippi and how it can't be tamed. Not to mention, you talk about all the crazy weather here. We get a little bit of everything in the United States. But yeah, we get the tornadoes. I don't see how people do it, but somehow people live out there. And some people really like it out there. Not many, I guess, because there aren't many people out there in like Kansas. But it's for some people. Very pretty little towns though, and real pretty down there, folks. In the Midwest, it's filled with a lot of good people. Of course, you work your way back up again. You're up into the Great Lakes states again. And of course, I find it real neat. You got a place like Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. And I mean, then you move out further west, and you're getting back to the Rockies. And the Rockies are bigger than the Appalachian Mountains. I personally prefer the Appalachian, but the Rockies are quite big, big old, big mountains. You see other things out there like Mount Rushmore. Now, when I went to Mount Rushmore, I was amazed at how just in the middle of nowhere it was. You would think Mount Rushmore would have a bit more around it, but no. Outside of Mount Rushmore, this famous national monument, it's just like just rural, standard South Dakota land. It ain't nothing fancy. It's just you go to Mount Rushmore, and it's just Mount Rushmore was kind of a letdown. It's somewhat smaller in real life. You think it's going to be bigger, but it was a lot smaller than what I had expected it would be. Nonetheless, an interesting sight because Mount Rushmore, and I'll get to the Hoover Dam in a minute, but the Mount Rushmore and the Hoover Dam are probably going to be here until the second coming. I mean, they're going to be the American pyramids. Like they will be here for thousands of years if the Lord don't come back in that time frame. And that's just fascinating to think about that Mount Rushmore and the Hoover Dam will outlive us all by many, many lifetimes, I'm willing to bet. Because they're these giant things made of stone that are kind of in the middle of nowhere. They're going to be here for a long time. And Mount Rushmore is a neat sight to see. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, it was definitely interesting going out there. I preferred Wyoming personally. I really liked Wyoming. I really liked it. Very pretty state. Very few people out there, but nonetheless a very pretty state. Of course, you go out west, you got a bunch of buffalo. And I've seen so many buffalo out west. I got tired of seeing them. And then buffalo are fascinating. They're like cows, kind of, but at the same time, also very different from a cow. I fed a buffalo one time at a zoo thing here in North Carolina, actually. And I actually, buffalo tongue got on me because you could actually feed them with right around this car thing. But I actually got to touch a buffalo tongue. It was big and black. A real neat sight and interesting feeling for your hand to be in a buffalo mouth. That wasn't intentional, but it just kind of happened. But it's just another thing about the United States is, I mean, you got all these different animals here. I mean, I remember I was in Colorado. I saw, a bald eagle flying over, in the pretty Colorado mountains, up in there in the Rockies. You got a bunch of pretty pines. That's one thing I do like about the Western states. When they do have forests, it's like pure pine. It's mostly pure evergreen out in the West, I've noticed. Mostly pure evergreen forest. And I've always had a thing for evergreens. So I really like seeing pure pine forest or you got further out, you got the redwoods. Definitely, I think the Rocky Mountain states are neat. And Utah. I've noticed a lot of people here in North Carolina seem to like Utah because we like that. We like the dry heat. You live in the humid heat enough, and it's like the dry heat don't sound so bad after a while. And definitely neat. One thing I like about the West is the West has all these national parks, so there's a lot of nature out there. In fact, I think it's in Nevada. About 80% of the land's actually still owned by the federal government because they actually just couldn't give it all away back in the time of frontier times because it used to be you could get 160 acres for free due to the Homestead Act. You just had to work the land for 5 years and you get 160 acres for free. And but they actually didn't give it all away. So in some of these states, it's most of the land's still owned by the federal government, and it's just crazy to really think about that. And you just see so much land out there. So the West, of course, has all these pretty national parks, and that's where a lot of the economy, I think, is built around them states. Is all the pretty national parks out there, and yeah, a lot of stuff to see. And then, of course, you get out to the Pacific, to the Pacific, and definitely there's a lot to be said out there. And it's just so much pretty nature in the West. The pretty forests. Now, of course, you got the giant redwoods, and I didn't even mention the Joshua trees near Vegas that are the oldest trees in the world. But they're these tiny little trees, but they live longer than anything else. And then, of course, famously out in California, you got the big old redwoods, huge giant trees. And, the Pacific Northwest. And the Pacific, is real neat. Another thing about America, we got two different sets of ocean. And then also we got Alaska. In Alaska, once again, it's like this giant icebox half the year. And then the other half of the year, it's real hot. Real humid. I mean, it's got giant mosquitoes. What I was trying to say, very big mosquitoes out there. Um, and then you got Hawaii, and Hawaii is you can grow anything in Hawaii. And I just do find it fascinating. The United States has extended as far as Hawaii, out there in the middle of the Pacific. So I mean, there's so much land in the United States, and I just love the land of the United States because it's so ancient. You know what I mean? Like America is such a young country. I mean, the oldest parts of America are 400 years old, and the youngest are less than 200. I mean, America is roughly ranging from about 150 years old to about 400 years old. It's not that old of a country, and it's just very young. And but the land itself is very ancient, and there's just, especially because Americans, we've been here so recently. I mean, it was originally inhabited by the Indians, and I definitely, for me, it's always like that's always put me in my place. It's like how ancient the land is and how young the country is, how our whole civilization has been here so briefly. Our ancestors were in Europe, but not that long ago. And the land here is so ancient. There's just so much to see. And I've already talked about the greatness of the land, the giant mountains, the great creeks, the streams, the rivers, the lakes, the great trees, all the great animals of America. I would have loved to see America in the year 1492, right before Columbus come. It would be very fascinating to see all the great Indian civilizations because we don't know as much about the Indian civilizations as we do about the European ones and the Eurasian ones. And I mean, all the civilizations of the old world, we just don't know as much about the new world. Sometimes it's a lot of guesstimation. We just don't know. We don't even really know, which, because waves of immigration, how the Indians got here, because it's all debated. There's probably multiple ways of immigration, but you know, it's just a very interesting thing. It's just the land is so ancient here in the United States, and that's just something I've really appreciated about how old and ancient the land is. Sometimes I think about how old the land really is. The land here, 100 years ago was cattle land, and 200 years before that, it was an old forest filled with real old trees. In fact, around here once, there used to be so many trees that were 200, 300 years old before, we all started chopping them down. Um, and it really, just the land itself. And the beauty of the land, I believe man was created for the Garden of Eden. We were created for God, but we were created to live in a place like Eden. We were placed in the Garden of Eden, and we were created for that natural environment. And I love the nature. And what I love about the United States is the diversity of the nature, where you have everything in the United States. You pick it, man. You've got you've got rainforest. Even in the United States, we've got rainforest. It turns out northern Idaho actually is a very large rainforest that's actually supported by rain and snow. I didn't know that until recently, but I was real neat to find out. I mean, you've just got everything in the United States. You've got the hot climate to the point where you've got a swamp. You've got mountains, and the mountains are famously cooler. You go up to the mountains, things cool off. You've got a more temperate climate. You got deserts in the United States. You've got you've got everything in the United States, weather-wise. And then you got Hawaii. I mean, once again, it does kind of amaze me that American civilization is extended as far as Hawaii. I mean, because it's just so different from the continental United States. It just really is fascinating to see the diversity, even within states. I talked about North Carolina, but you talk about California, for instance. California, I mean, you've got the famous divide between Northern and Southern California, and how they look. But even within that, you can kind of break it down a bit more. And that's true of a lot of states in the United States. You got East Texas and West Texas. You got you got everything. It's kind of crazy. And it's just you just got so much different stuff around here. There's so much different land. It's a fascinating sight. So it's just there's so much land, so much nature, so many different species and things here. And it's just such a beautiful country. That's what I love about living in the United States. It's so beautiful. There's so many different other reasons I love living here. We have freedom of speech, where really no other country in the world really has freedom of speech in the way we have it in the United States. I think we have a very strong foundation on Protestant Christianity. People always are like, well, every pretty building is Catholic, and every pretty building Protestants have was just taken from Catholics, but not in America. In America, we built them ourselves. And it's just the land is so beautiful and so ancient. I just love the land. I love the beauty of the United States. I mean, I could talk for hours about land and about nature. I love it. It's very beautiful. And I mean, I think when we live in land, live in the nature, eat, more fruits and vegetables and stuff, I think we're living more like how we were eating and how we were living in Eden. And I think we live more like we are supposed to in Eden. I think we're happier overall. And I love America in part because of just how extremely beautiful it is and how the beauty of the land. So with that said, that's all I got to say for today. That's just one way in which I love the United States. It's just I really love living here. It's a wonderful country. Anyhow, thank you all for watching. God bless, and Christ will conquer.